Shift the power! Power shift! 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 Stand up! Do it!
When we say power, you say shift! Power!
Shift! Power! Shift!
When we say power, you say shift!
Power! Shift!
Power!
Shift!
When we say shift, you say power! Shift!
Power!
Shift!
Power!
All right!
Wow, okay.
Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, power shift.
What's up, Power Shift? Make some noise if you guys had a good time today.
You guys had a big day. We started in the morning with 4 hours of grassroots training. I want to applaud all you guys because that's a long time to sit in a room, but you learned
give
a
yourselves a
ton
hand.
of stuff. You had workshops and panels that you just got out of. How were they? What'd you think? Good, good. All right, and now we have our second round of keynotes. It's a big night. I'm stoked you guys are here. I guess we'll get tonight's keynotes going, and then we can have a rest of the power shift.
Real quick, is Mayor Engen in the house? I didn't think so.
We can go out of order. We're going out of order.
Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to cue up a little video from Senator John Tester from Montana.
Hello from the United States Senate, and thanks for having me share a few words about climate change. More importantly, thanks for your hard work and for standing up for a stronger future for our state. This nation and the world we live in, the work you do, the hours you put in, go a long way. As Montanans, we're blessed with an unspoiled land, clean water, and clean air. It's our responsibility to pass those resources down to our kids and grandkids better than we found them. I bring the perspective of a third-generation farmer to the issue of climate change. In my line of work, it means extreme weather patterns, unpredictable moisture. Climate change means less certainty for crops and insects, and it means threatens our food security. Anyone who eats ought to be concerned. It's not just agriculture. Climate change has an impact on Montana's second largest industry too. We've got world-class hunting and fishing. Folks come from all over the world to explore our backcountry and our national parks. Our outdoor industry is worth $3 billion to Montana every year. Our challenge is to keep this important debate at the forefront. Our challenge is to make a real commitment to renewable energy because the decisions we make today will guide our energy future for the next generation. Montana is rich in wind and solar power, geothermal and biomass energy. Using those resources will strengthen our nation. I'll keep doing my part as your senator, but all of us in Congress need to keep hearing from all of you. You know what's at stake. I know what's at stake. Keep up the good work in raising awareness, because I don't want to change the name of Glacier Park to just Park.
And we all got to really thank Tester for that. He was going to come to the conference, and his DC office was in a huff because he couldn't make it last minute. And he said, you know what, I'm going to make a video for you guys. So we actually made that for this conference. That's not a recorded thing. So yeah, if we can give him another round of applause.
Well, if Mayor Engen shows up, he will speak. But until then, I'd like to bring up our second guest, author Jeff Galis. Jeff is a father, a husband, and an award-winning writer and environmentalist who has been exploring the intersection of science, nature, and culture for 15 years. Originally from Calgary, Alberta, he has had the honor of working with a number of committed nonprofit environmental organizations, including the Alberta Eco Trust Foundation, David Suzuki Foundation, the National Resources Defense Council, and the Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative. He left the nonprofit sector to complete a graduate degree in environmental studies at the University of Montana, where he earned a Doris Duke Conservation Fellowship awarded each year to support future conservation leaders. His most rewarding experiences involve teaching and encouraging others to write well and respect our shared environment. He has taught writing at both the University of Oregon and the University of Montana. He also teaches university field courses for the Wild Rockies Field Institute and Wildland Studies, and he currently lives in Missoula, Montana, with his wife, Ylva. Please give a warm Rocky Mountain Power Shift welcome to Jeff Galis.
All right, thanks, Steve, and thanks for all your help getting this organized. I'd like to big round of applause for all the people that helped put this conference on this weekend. I know that they were short-staffed and it took a heck of a lot of work to put it on and to provide all these great speakers for you, so thank you very much. And thanks for the nice round of applause. I think there's something slightly ironic about the fact that I'm up here talking with you guys this evening, because you see, at your age, I didn't give a damn about any of the things you guys are talking about and discussing and learning about here this weekend. I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, which is now the world headquarters for the tar sand industry. Like many of my fellow Albertans, I was an apathetic citizen at best in my early 20s, I'm ashamed to admit. I had never heard of a single environmental organization, and I didn't know anyone that belonged to one. I didn't attend community meetings. I didn't write letters to the editor. I never contacted my political representative, and in fact, I didn't even know who he was. I didn't even vote. I was too busy racing motorcycles, partying, playing basketball, and watching football on TV. I was too busy fulfilling all these short-term, selfish desires, while Big Oil helped Alberta's so-called progressive conservatives consolidate its now 41-year hold on power in an unaccountable democracy that often reminds me more of Nigeria than it does the United States. That all changed when I finished university and moved to Budapest, Hungary in 1993, shortly after the Berlin Wall fell. There, at the age of 30, I got my first environmental education. I was hired as a communications officer for a medium-sized international environmental organization called the Regional Environmental Center. Everyone there spoke English, but most of the 4 dozen or so employees were from countries in Central and Eastern Europe or the former Soviet Union. Places like Hungary, Slovakia, Russia, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria. They had all lived lives of quiet desperation and violence, and they were happy to be free to openly challenge the business community and their governments to improve the state of the environment. Many of them had been political and environmental activists during some of the most repressive regimes in modern history. Despite political realities that made public criticism of government dangerous, they were doing what they could to nurture democracy and to prevent unchecked industrial activity from poisoning the air, land, and water. The story I remember most vividly is Adriana's. Adriana is a young woman from Romania who, on December 21st, 1989, was one of thousands of people who gathered in Bucharest's Revolution Square to listen to a speech by the country's increasingly unpopular leader, Nicolae Ceausescu. Ceausescu was one of the most despotic leaders in the Soviet bloc, his regime one of the most staunchly Stalinist. Despite the fact the army had opened fire on a crowd in another city just 5 days earlier, Adriana and her fellow citizens, many of them students, jeered and booed Ceausescu in Revolution Square. Their vocal public condemnation of Ceausescu's tyranny kicked off an open revolt that spread to every major city in Romania over the next 2 days. 1,000 Romanians died, but the people would not be denied. Ceausescu and his wife were apprehended by the police, who quickly turned them over to the army. On Christmas Day, 1989, they were convicted of genocide and the illegal gathering of wealth. The tyranny was over. I was struck by the courage and the commitment Adriana and her fellow citizens had shown in their bid to overthrow a government that was clearly not ruling in the public interest. Where, I began to wonder, were these people at home? Although I grew up in a democratic country where it was perfectly acceptable to criticize the government, I didn't personally know anyone who had made an effort to actively influence public policy, apart from voting. And that struck me as odd. About the same time Adriana had recounted her harrowing tale in Bucharest, I was invited to accompany a delegation from the Regional Environmental Center to attend a major UN conference in Sofia, Bulgaria. It was the third Ministerial Environment for Europe conference, and it was the follow-up to the Rio conference. I became an instant fan of the Netherlands, but I watched in utter disbelief as Canada, aided and abetted by the United States, undermined every idea the progressive and outspoken Dutch proposed. Although it comes as no surprise to me now, it was shocking to me then how environmentally unfriendly the Canadian delegation was. So I vowed to look into Canada's environmental record when I returned home. What I have found since is shocking, and I no longer believe Canada to be the progressive environmental steward the world thinks it is. Perhaps it never was. The discovery changed my life, and since I returned to North America, I have been working in the spirit of Adriana and all the other activists I met in Europe for social and environmental justice here at home. One of the things I enjoy most now is teaching. Every summer, I spend a month outside in the wilderness with groups of interested and engaged students, people just like you, who have chosen much earlier than I ever did to learn about ecology, environmental issues, and how we might come to terms with them. 2 years ago, I went on an adventure with about 36 high school students. I flew up to Whitehorse, Yukon, way up north of the 60th parallel, and we all piled into a school bus and spent a month driving through coastal BC, around Vancouver Island, and back to Whitehorse via Alaska. Along the way, we visited remote First Nations communities, conducted midnight science experiments on tidal flats, and learned to scuba dive in the fecund waters of the Georgia Strait. We also learned about a variety of environmental issues, from unsustainable forestry to fish farms and declining salmon populations, and climate change, of course. We talked a lot about climate change. And no matter how upbeat and positive we tried to make it, those wily high school students understood well enough that climate change was bad news getting worse. At the end of the course, as our ferry followed the gray whale migration route north to Alaska, I checked in with each student about what they had learned and how they felt about it. There were the usual comments about how cool and fun the trip was, but many took the time to reflect on how much they had learned, not only about environmental science and some of our pressing environmental issues, but about themselves and how they work in the world. I felt energized and optimistic to see how mature and thoughtful these students were, and to hear about the plans they were making about how to make the world a better place. But when I posed my question to one young woman, a bright 10th grader with a great sense of humor, who had been nothing but cheerful and cooperative the whole trip, she looked at me with a scowl on her face and said, "You know what makes me mad? Everywhere we go, people are always telling us about all these horrible environmental problems, and they tell us that it's up to us to fix them. Well," she continued, "I'm tired of it. For one thing, we didn't cause them. And for another, your generation isn't doing much about them either. Why should we?" I've heard similar comments from undergraduates who feel overwhelmed by the scope and severity of the issues we face, and who are angry and frustrated at the lack of action from our political representatives, both liberal and conservative, Republican and Democrat. One undergraduate told me that students in his environmental studies program at a small liberal arts college on the other side of the country were complaining to their professors about how depressing everything was, and that they were getting tired of hearing it. They wanted to know if they couldn't just talk about something else. This, I think, is the primary challenge of our age: to openly and honestly consider the social and environmental problems we face, and, despite the enormity of the task ahead and the lack of meaningful progress to date, to embrace the challenge, with courage, resolve, and equanimity. The reality is that along with the gift of being born into wealthy democracies, we've been bequeathed quite a mess. We don't really have much choice. Indeed, the fact we live in an open, democratic society obliges us to do the things that our fellow human beings in China and Myanmar and Russia can't do. I'm not going to spend too much time dwelling on the specific environmental issues because you've been learning about them here this weekend, and I assume the fact you're here means you're probably well up to speed anyways. Suffice to say that biodiversity is plummeting, water is increasingly overexploited and polluted, and forests are being leveled for timber. And then there's climate change. The fact we are altering the climate with megatons of greenhouse gas emissions is the most pressing social and environmental issue in human history. It's melting the ice caps, acidifying our oceans, raising sea levels, intensifying weather patterns, and altering ecosystems, the very fabric of life on a massive scale. Perhaps the saddest part about the whole thing is that poor and undeveloped societies, which contributed relatively little to the problem, will endure the brunt of the consequences. I think the key is to understand that these aren't really scientific or even environmental problems. What's at the root of all these crises is a political process that serves the interests of corporations rather than the public interest. While researching my next book called Little Black Lies about the war on truth in the battle for the tar sands, it's become abundantly clear that the reason we have done so little to prevent biodiversity loss, pollution, and climate change is that private corporate interests whose bottom lines and profit margins rely on business as usual don't want to change the way they do business. At every turn, they have undermined progressive energy and environmental policies and discredited environmentalists who support them. They've funded elaborate movements to discredit the science and confuse the public. And they've ramped up efforts to exploit and burn every last barrel of oil, no matter how dirty or how much of a risk it poses to human and environmental health. Nowhere in the Western world is this worse than in Canada. Canada, it turns out, is an international environmental laggard on environmental policy and practice. According to Yale and Columbia Universities, Canada ranked 37th in their 2012 Environmental Performance Index, far behind green leaders such as Sweden, Norway, and Costa Rica, and trailing major industrial economies including Germany, France, Japan, and Brazil. Worse yet, our performance is deteriorating. We now rank 52nd in terms of progress over the last decade. Nowhere are these problems more apparent than in the environmental assessment of industrial development. According to William Leese, a scientist at the University of Ottawa and one of Canada's foremost experts in environmental assessment, Canada has an embarrassing and consistent record of failure in credible environmental assessments in high-profile, large projects. And it's been well documented that the environmental assessments of the big oil sands mines, which are polluting the Athabasca River, pushing threatened species like caribou to the brink, and contributing significantly to climate change, have been based on incomplete scientific information. These assessments rely instead on corporate goodwill and a cornucopian faith in technology that might, at some unknown point in the future, mitigate the significant environmental risks that are openly acknowledged in the environmental assessments themselves. But perhaps the most frightening aspect of Canada's new petrostate persona are the egregious attacks against those who oppose the tar sands and the pipelines they fuel. Oil industry lobbyists and politicians, backed by obsequious members of the media, have labeled Aboriginal and environmental groups as radicals, extremists, and adversaries. While Bishop Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama, and several Nobel laureates raised their voices against the tar sands, and Forbes magazine celebrated the success of American citizens opposing the Keystone XL pipeline, Stephen Harper's conservatives went one step further. They lumped environmentalists and Aboriginal groups, people just like you and me, into the same category as white supremacists and called us enemies of the state. According to an assessment prepared by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, our version of the FBI and CIA, these kinds of people, people who use civil disobedience to have their voices heard, people who propose boycotts to oppose things like the seal hunt, have become dangerous subversives that need to be put under surveillance. This is what we're up against. Even if you don't care a whit about climate change or biodiversity loss, these attacks on our democratic freedoms in the name of expedient and unsustainable resource development should make every Canadian and American citizen very concerned. This is no time for us to wither on the vine or stick our head in the sands. Instead, we need to embrace the challenge before us with courage, resolve, and equanimity. The challenges before us are enormous, but they can be overcome. Just look at what Adriana and her fellow citizens accomplished in Central and Eastern Europe. And just look at what all the good work of so many people accomplished on the Keystone XL pipeline. And as a dear friend reminded me recently, it's worth remembering what has been accomplished by those who came before us. The Wilderness Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Air and Water Acts, NEPA, a network of national parks and wilderness areas that's the envy of the world. And now, unbelievably, the beginning of an era of dam removal, including the Milltown Dam just upstream from Missoula. These were battles hard fought and won, battles we won't have to fight again. And it has always been young people who have led the way. It was students who rode the buses to Birmingham during the Civil Rights Movement. It was students who stood in front of the guns at Kent State to help put an end to the Vietnam War. And it was students who stood in line to vote for Obama. And it will be students who will lead the way as we clean up government and the atmosphere. We have only just begun. Long-term social and environmental change will take the commitment of thousands of people years to accomplish. It is a long-term project, and it needs people like you to see it through. Remember that as you graduate from university and start families and careers of your own. Don't forget why you came to Rocky Mountain Power Shift in Missoula, Montana, beneath the watchful gaze of the Sapphire Mountains. Keep your inner fires burning. But like any fire, it will require tending or it will go out. If I may provide some unsolicited advice, it is this. Work hard, but not too hard. While change will require hard work, it is not up to any single individual to take the world upon their shoulders. Commit to do what you can, when you can, and make sure you leave room for it in your life. But don't work so much or so intensely that you burn out. Keep an open mind and read widely. Ideas change and knowledge is dynamic. It wasn't so long ago that the earth was at the center of the universe, and now it revolves around the sun. Advocate for what you believe in, but be open to new ideas and creative ways of doing things. It is the inability of so many people to do this that has made these problems so difficult to resolve in the first place. And celebrate your successes, no matter how small or seemingly inconsequential. Social change is a long, difficult process. It will take time, and there will be much disappointment along the way. But there will be victories too, and celebrating them with your friends and colleagues will keep you strong and focused. Lastly, get out in the woods. Many of us got into this because we love being outside, watching grizzly bears cavort in a meadow or salmon spawning upstream. Nothing can feed your fire like a walk in the wilderness, just to remind you of why you do what you do. So thanks for coming out here this weekend. I think this has been a great success, and I wish I had the opportunity to attend something like this when I was an undergraduate. And the best of luck to every one of you in whatever you choose to do. Thank you.
Give it up for Jeff Galis. All right, so you just heard from Jeff, an environmental author But that's not the only way we can communicate about our environment and our surroundings. There are many other ways, including the realm of spoken word and hip-hop. And with that, I would like to introduce two poets, Mr. Kyle Sutherland and Mr. Devin Fowler. Please welcome them to the stage.
What up, Power Shift? Yeah. All right, so my name's Kyle Sutherland. I am from Denver, Colorado. I go to the Metropolitan State College of Denver, located in the heart of downtown Denver. And we always have the mountains, silhouetted against the backdrop, just like this school with the mountains. We sit in the valley, and it's really beautiful. Out there, I am the president of the Denver Hip Hop Congress, and I've been doing slam poetry for about 3, almost 4 years now. I ran an open mic in the historic art district of Santa Fe for about a year. And so the message that I'd like to bring to Power Shift today is communication in general, linguistics and kinesics, body language, but especially the way in which we use art to communicate, which is sometimes as effective, sometimes less effective than statistics or showing people, the actual effects of things. So raise your hand if you know what slam poetry is, or if you've ever been to a slam. Damn, see, yeah, that's what's up. For those of you who don't know, slam poetry was started in the mid-1980s by a construction worker named Mark Smith. And then at slams, everyone goes, "So what?" So we're gonna do that again, and everyone's gonna yell, "So what?" When you hear Mark Smith, you yell, "So what?" Slam poetry. Wait. Mark Smith, so what? All right, again. Slam poetry was started in the mid-1980s by an entrepreneur named Mark Smith. So what? He was tired of going to boring open mics where old women would get up and ramble on about their kittens. If I wanted monotone, he said, I'd read a book. So he decided to give 5 random people in the audience scorecards to judge poems on a scale of 1 to 10. And this has really taken on a lot of velocity in the last few years, and it's really opened up a dialogue and a performance venue for a lot of young people and old people to express their ideas and to get up in front of people, in front of your community, and express not only who you are, but what you think, why you think it, and what is important to you. And so this is an incredible venue, an incredible way in which to communicate to other people. And I really encourage Montana, because I don't know of any national poetry slam team or slam poet to come from Montana. However, you can start slams at your college. There's a national event for that called CUPSI. There's a national event for adults, and there's also a national event for youth. And this is a great venue for communicating and getting people on the same page. A couple years ago, I was on HBO for Brave New Voices, which was a youth poetry festival, and I did a poem about the environment. And you can type in Kyle Sutherland Poetry to YouTube if you'd like to see it. It's a group piece in slam poetry. It's developed into multiple voice poems where people get up and they have something pre-written and they recite it together. And I'm going to do an individual piece. Devin is going to do a piece, and then we are going to do a short group piece to kind of give you guys an example of what that looks like. So yeah, in that poem, it was a group piece. My friend Dominique, she's 6'4", and she's a black woman, and I'm like 5'9", and I'm white. So we had this beautiful juxtaposition. She played Mother Earth and an abused woman, and I played humanity and abusive man. And I encourage you guys to look at it. And again, this is just, in poetry in general, has always been about the soul, about the rivers, about the sky, about simple existence, and how complex that is. So look into slam poetry if you haven't. Start workshops, start slamming. It's really a great way to communicate. And any professor, any teacher is essentially a spoken word artist. Knowledge and communication is primarily spoken. So with that, I'm going to do an excerpt from a book that I'm currently writing, and that is in the process of being published as well, called Free the World, which deals with social justice, environmental justice, etc., because the inner landscape is as important as the outer landscape, and the mental environment needs to be mapped
and tended to sustainably, just as much so as the outside environment. So this is an excerpt from the book that I am writing called Free the World. To unflinchingly seek freedom is to lob truth like stones at all false power structures. It is to willingly invest yourself in the future of our children, to fight for the dignity of each one. The true quest is to become sensitive to higher vibrations, to find little moments of great beauty where the wind of this novel cosmos whirls, her songs sung through the crevices of your being and ocean within, so that the garden of our inner gravity may be tended to gracefully, so that the harvest of our deeds may be blessed. Snap if I forget my lines. It's nervous to be in front of people. So that the harvest of our deeds may be blessed, to find safely our way, lighthouse horizon. The human struggle is that birds fly. So I write to dream us wings, free the world, because every beautiful flower is every beautiful flower, and love's love lit lights the lights of a moment. Any moment lived or experienced is holy. To free your mind, the world, and there are no countries. There's only one world spinning dizzy. There's only one world that spins for free. But we are charged with life for living and put to death for demanding freedom, silenced for having a voice, but we are screaming for the world, for justice. I am merely a young poet speaks, and this is what I say, to say my human, that I contact souls through eye contact, portals into being, have been called to lead. And we must be led, but you must lead as well. So can you do this? Can you lead yourself for all of us? Can you find stars within the soil of yourself and pull from the inmost depth of your soul's core the light of the truth that we ought to be stronger than this zombie apocalypse, and that spiritual is being one body, one world humbled. But how many minds tonight, under the living stars, are trying to conjure a more perfect understanding? How many people on any issue agree or disagree or stand as more predictable? As opposites unite, all is cycled in a circle to free the world. Thank you. Thank you. And next up to the stage is my friend Devin.
That was Kyle Sutherland, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Devin Fowler. I'm from Denver, Colorado as well. Kyle Sutherland helped me to find my confidence, ignite it, so I could come out and perform in front of people. He inspired my writing, he inspired me. I'd also like to thank Stephen Mumblow, Yecha, Tyler, everyone else who planned this wonderful power shift. Let's hear it for them. I've been writing poetry for a couple of years. Like I said, Kyle's really gotten me into it. So this is a new experience for me, performing in front of people and performing the words that I write. I wrote a poem specifically for Rocky Mountain Power Shift, something that I thought my audience would like. And we learned that in our workshops today. You've got to appeal to your audience, as my friend Zach said earlier. And we also have a workshop tomorrow. We're going to be doing a workshop called Bringing Your Beats to the Movement, talking about how poetry and hip-hop can enhance your community. So I encourage everyone who wants to learn more about that to come check us out. Bring in any poetry that you write or anything like that, and we'd love to hear it. So without further ado. Why is it that a majority of people only seem to care about this planet when there is a tragedy or disaster of epic proportions? When it should be the other way around. The majority should be helping this planet prosper, and the minority? Well, there should be no minority at all. But sadly, this is the way it is. For the time being. We can change. Let me say that again. We can change. We can change the way we act. We can change the way we treat each other. We can surely change the way we treat our planet. But we must do it together. You see, there is strength in numbers. We must take a stand against those who are only in it for money and power and take their greed and turn it into hope and use that hope to show Mother Earth that we can treat her right. But we will need leaders, not just one, but many. And the leaders not just that one poster icon. The leaders are everybody. The leaders are those who volunteer their time to help the environment. The leaders are those who are trying to make their company more green. The leaders are those who get their friends to recycle who didn't before. You see, leaders come in all different shapes and sizes and come from all different places around this world and have different ideologies. But they all have one great trait in common. They learn. They learn how to get people involved. They learn new ways to improve this planet and its environment. They learn from what they were doing so they can make it better. So that one day, Mother Earth will be so beautiful and so majestic. She says, thank you.
Leaders lead by example. If a leader is not leading by example, then a leader isn't leading. Leaders lead by example. Here's an example to sample this. A parent leads by the truth they teach to their kids.
A teacher in lessons taught.
A general in battles fought. The dominant male lion earns the respect to lead the pack.
A silverback gorilla protects the family.
Polar bear cubs follow their mother. At the front of every race is a leader. He is led by the end of the race. He is led by a goal. Leaders need leaders. Masters need masters. Teachers need teachers. We lead each other.
It is not easy to lead.
To battle all these expectations and reach a consensus. To pave a path of perseverance. To preserve a path to follow. Actions speak louder than words. Thank you.
Please keep this going. Give it up. So glad these guys can make it all the way from Denver. Thank you for that. All right, without further ado, let's keep this thing rolling. To introduce our next guest is the lead organizer of Rocky Mountain Power Shift, Miss Yecha Bookout. Give it up.
I'm just gonna mess with the mic for a little bit, you know. Thank you so much for that. I just wanna thank a few people before I introduce our next speaker. I just wanna first off thank all of you who are in the audience tonight. I think it's really amazing that so many people decided to use their weekend to come out and come to Power Shift. I just am really excited about this movement. I think it's really great to see this room filled up with so many people. Yeah, thank you. You guys are definitely empowering me to work harder in this movement. Secondly, I want to thank the core organizing team for all their great work. If you guys want to stand up, that would be awesome. Stand on up, please.
You got a blue hat.
Even though our team was incredibly small, I'm so proud of everybody that worked on this. We've been working on it for 8 months, and you guys have been pulling so many long hours. Even though you have school or other commitments, it's amazing. Thank you so much. The next presenter, I'm so excited to introduce. I have had the pleasure to briefly meet him in Copenhagen, and he is just someone that I've looked up to and who gives me so much inspiration. This man's name is Bill McKibben. Bill McKibben is the author of a dozen books about the environment, beginning with The End of Nature in 1989, which is regarded as the first book for a general audience on climate change. He's the founder of a grassroots climate change campaign. Many of you may have heard of it, 350.org, which has coordinated 15,000 rallies in 189 countries since 2009, one of which was held here in Missoula back in 2009. That was pretty awesome. Time magazine called him the planet's best green journalist, and the Boston Globe said in 2010 that he was probably the country's most important environmentalist. He's a Schumann Distinguished Scholar at Middlebury College. He holds honorary degrees from a dozen colleges, including the Universities of Massachusetts and Maine, the State University of New York, and collegiate colleges. In 2011, he was elected a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and spent several days in jail for coordinating the massive civil disobedience against the Keystone Pipeline project. Last week, he headed a national day of action to say no to the Keystone XL pipeline. They collected over 800,000 signatures opposing the Keystone XL pipeline in 24 hours. And so also thank you for signing that too. I know a bunch of people in the audience have signed that. So let's give Bill McKibben a very warm welcome.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm trusting you all can hear me. It's a great pleasure to get to join you there, if only via Skype. I'm sorry not to be there in person with you. It's one of my favorite places in the world. The one thing you can say for Skype is that it's low carbon. Look, what you're doing there this weekend could not be more important. You know, I wrote the first book about global warming 23 years ago in 1989. That is to say, before you were born. That's how long we've known about climate change. We knew what we needed to know 20 years ago, really. We knew that when you burn coal and gas and oil, you put carbon in the atmosphere. And we knew that the molecular structure of carbon trapped heat that would otherwise radiate back out to space. The only thing we did not know was how fast and how hard it was going to pinch. And the story of my adult life, the story of the last 2 decades, has been watching as it pinched harder and faster than we would have expected. And let me just bring you just for 1 second up to date. I know you all know about everything there is to know about climate change. But just to kind of bring you the report from, at 350, we work in pretty much every country around the world except North Korea. So let me bring you the story about just what we hear now every day from someplace around the world. The Earth is coming deeply unbalanced. We've raised the temperature of the planet 1 degree so far, and that means we're trapping about 3/4 of a watt of extra solar energy per square meter of the Earth's surface. That doesn't sound like much, but it turns out to be a lot. The Earth's oceans are about 30% more acid than they were 40 years ago. Everything frozen on Earth is melting, and melting quickly. Maybe most dramatically, especially what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years, are the changes in the Earth's hydrological cycle, the way that water moves around the planet. Here's the one thing always to remember and to try and explain to people, just a basic fact of physics. Warm air holds more water vapor than cold. That means that because we've raised the temperature of the planet 1 degree, the atmosphere is about 4% wetter than it used to be. That is an enormous change in a basic physical parameter of the planet. We think that that number was more or less stable for the 10,000 years that we call the Holocene. Maybe the best evidence that we've left the Holocene and moved into some other new, as yet unnamed geological epoch is precisely that increase in moisture in the atmosphere. And it means that we have loaded the dice for drought and for flood. And we're seeing both of those in astonishing numbers now around the globe. Just in the last couple of years, I mean, think of what's happened. Summer of 2010, that enormous heat wave across Russia, it cut their grain harvest dramatically and kept the Kremlin got scared and they stopped exporting grain to the rest of the world. In a normal year, Russia is the third biggest grain exporter on the planet. So the price of corn and wheat went up about 70% overnight, and it stayed there since, because we've had crop failures for drought in the North China Plain, in parts of Western Europe, in parts of Australia, disastrously across the Horn of Africa, and most recently on our continent across Texas and Oklahoma, which last year recorded the warmest summers ever seen in the U.S. The drought is deeper than it was during the Dust Bowl. We think that 500 million trees died last year in Texas alone. At the height of the forest fires around the city of Austin in September, the head of the Texas Forest Firefighting Service said, "No human being has ever fought fire in conditions like this." And he was essentially right. The humidity was nearly zero and the temperature was off the charts. Once that water has evaporated up into the atmosphere, it's going to come down. A water vapor molecule only, on average, stays in the atmosphere about 7 days. And so we've dramatically increased the chances of flood. And again, all over the world we see it. Summer of 2010, it was Pakistan. There's a stretch of the Indus River up above the Khyber Pass there in the mountains that normally gets 3 feet of rain in a year, and it got 12 feet of rain in a week. And that's why the Indus River swelled to the point where it covered a quarter of the country, and 20 million people were homeless. You may remember the pictures from Australia around this time last year of the flooding in Queensland. Then last spring, it was the Mississippi and the Missoula rivers at the highest levels ever recorded. We were having to blow up levees in order to save cities. In the fall, it was the turn for my state, Vermont, here in the Northeast. Hurricane Irene made her way up the East Coast. And as she passed over record warm sea surface temperatures off New York and New Jersey, she soaked up huge amounts of water, which she dumped on Vermont. The damage was unbelievable. We broke our old one-day rainfall records by 25 and 30% and more. That shouldn't really be possible. I mean, we've been keeping rainfall records for 200 years. These were so far off the charts that only explanation is that we're living on a kind of different world than those rainfall records were set on. In the fall after that, it was the turn of Central America. Hundreds of people dead across El Salvador and Guatemala and Nicaragua and Honduras. The president of Honduras saying development's been set back 20 years. Late in the fall, into the early winter, it was in Thailand. The damage from flooding in Thailand, record flooding, was incredibly intense. They think it was equivalent to damage to 18% of the country's gross domestic product last year. That's an astonishing number. When Hurricane Katrina banged into the United States 5 years ago, it did damage equivalent to 0.75% of our GDP. So in percentage terms, it was 25 times as worse in Thailand. And of course, it's always worth bearing in mind when you talk about places like Thailand or Pakistan or El Salvador that these places have done next to nothing to cause this problem. They don't use enough fossil fuel to be a major source of global warming. The 4% of us who live in this country are responsible for more than a third of the global warming gases currently in the atmosphere, because we've been pushing them out there for so long. And of course, the one other thing to remember is just that all the damage we're seeing comes in the early stages of climate change. We've raised the temperature 1 degree so far, but the climatologists that have been completely right to this point have told us that 1 degree will be 4 or 5 degrees before the century is out unless we get our act together. And by getting our act together, I mean getting off coal and gas and oil far faster than anyone's planning to right now. At the moment, in fact, we're doing next to nothing to get off coal and gas and oil. Their use keeps increasing around the world. Last year saw the biggest one-year increase in the amount of carbon spewed into the atmosphere since the start of the Industrial Revolution. And the reason, above all, that we get nowhere is because of the financial might of the fossil fuel industry. This is the most profitable enterprise that human beings have ever engaged in. Exxon announced its profit last week for last year. And they made $41 billion. That's more than any company in the history of money, okay? That gives them, in our political system, the ability to block change. And that's what they have done. That's why we have an unbroken 20-year bipartisan record of accomplishing nothing in Washington. And it's why we're going to have to really build a movement to make it stop, a movement for our time, the equivalent of what the civil rights movement was 40 years ago, a movement that takes large numbers of people and asks them to do remarkable things. We only really started trying to build this movement a few years ago. Before then, I think we counted on the idea, I did, that if scientists kept explaining to our political leaders that the worst thing that ever happened in the world was happening, they would do what needed doing. But what we didn't reckon on was the fact that while those scientists were talking in one ear, the fossil fuel industry would be bellowing in the other ear, this kind of mix of threats and promises that have been enough so far to prevent action, to keep bad things happening. We're never going to have the money that those guys have, so we need to find other currencies to work in, and those other currencies are passion and spirit and creativity and numbers, and it's possible to assemble them. You're proof of that right there today, and we've seen the same thing around the world. When we started 350.org in the winter of 2008, we had no money at all. It was me and 7 students at Middlebury College here in Vermont, where I hang out. They were seniors, so they weren't done with school, but they were more or less done with school, if you know what I mean. And we decided we'd set to work. It was a pretty daunting idea to try and organize globally. That's one reason we chose this kind of strange name, this wonky scientific data point. The scientist led by James Hansen at NASA had just put out a paper saying 350 parts per million CO2 was the most we could safely have in the atmosphere. We figured that as long as we were going to work around the world, Arabic numerals would be our ally because they translate across linguistic boundaries. And so that's what we set to work with. There were 7 young people. There are 7 continents. Each one picked one, and we went to work. The guy who got the Antarctic also had to take care of the internet, okay? And off we went to work. And what we found all over the world was great. People, mostly, but not entirely, young people, ready to go to work. Now, some parts of the world, they don't call themselves environmentalists, but every part of the world, there are people thinking about how they're going to feed people, war and peace, social progress, women's rights, all the things that you can't have, that no one's working on right now in Thailand because they're just trying to get people high and dry again. You know, all the things you can't have in a destabilizing world. And so those were our allies. And we told everybody we were going to start, and we started with this one big day of action in the fall of 2009. We told everybody, no matter where they were, to do something, and we didn't know how it would go. We got the sense it might work 2 days early, October 22nd. We were sitting around this little office we'd borrowed in downtown Manhattan, and the phone rang, and it was our organizer, one of our 2 organizers in Ethiopia. They were a pair of sisters, 17 and 18 years old. Lily was on the phone. She said, the government took away our permit for Saturday, so we can't do our demonstration with everybody else. We're doing it today, so they can't stop us, and we're really sorry. We don't want to jump the gun. We don't want to spoil it for everybody. We were so looking forward to doing it with everybody else, and we have 15,000 young people right now out in the street in Addis Ababa chanting 350. So I was like, Lily, don't worry about the date. It's okay, you know. For the next 3 days, the pictures just flowed in from all over the world. Before it was done, there had been 5,100 demonstrations in 181 countries. CNN said it was the most widespread day of political activity in the planet's history. We've gone on from that to do more of these kind of huge days of global action. The last one in the fall that I know some of you helped with was we called Moving Planet Day, and it was built around transportation, and all over the world there were people on bicycles, because bicycles are a part of the solution, and because bicycles are one of the few tools that both rich and poor human beings use. And so it was a great chance to demonstrate that kind of solidarity that we need so badly. We're going to keep doing those things. In fact, May 12th of this year coming up, we're going to do a big day that's all over the world, any place where people have already felt the sting of climate change. We're going to call it Connect the Dots, and there are by now thousands of these dots around the world, places that have seen drought, flood, fire, melt, all the things that are plaguing the planet already. We'll keep doing this kind of educational work. It's really key. We need you involved in it. And I'm afraid we also need to go beyond that too. As this movement has matured, and as we've determined and seen just how tough the fossil fuel industry is as an opponent, we've come to understand also that we're going to need to be not more radical, I'll get back to that word in a moment, but more willing to put ourselves on the line a little bit. Well, I'll tell you about this Keystone thing that we've done this last year. I really got involved. I should have gotten involved in it long ago, because our Indigenous brothers and sisters up in Canada have been telling us for a long time what a disaster it is up there where they're mining these tar sands. But there are a lot of disasters going on in the world at any given moment, and it's hard to know which one to be involved in. I got obsessed with this in the spring when Jim Hansen at NASA said, look, that's the second biggest pool of carbon on Earth, those tar sands, after the oil fields of Saudi Arabia. It was burning Saudi Arabia more than anything else that raised the temperature of the planet a degree already. If we find the next Saudi Arabia and just do the same thing, then we're idiots. And so we figured we have to try and do what we can. We sent out a letter. I wrote a letter, and a few of my friends signed on to it, a couple of Indigenous leaders, and Naomi Klein and Wendell Berry and other heroes of mine. And we sent it out and just said, come to Washington, we're going to do civil disobedience. And we did not know how it would go. We planned on 2 weeks of sitting in outside the White House. And the very first day, 80 people showed up to be arrested, which was more than we had expected, and it was more than the police had expected. Instead of doing what they normally do, which is take you away in handcuffs and keep you a few hours and fine you, they decided they were going to try and deter us by sticking us in jail. And so some of us got the all expense paid, 3 days in Central Cell Block in D.C., which is exactly as much fun as it sounds like it might be. The good news is it didn't deter a soul. Day 2, 100 people showed up. Before the 2 weeks were out, 1,253 people had been arrested, the largest civil disobedience action in this country about any issue for the last 30 years. It was beautiful to see it happen. And then it was beautiful to see the kind of Occupy movement a few weeks later rise up. And they came together with us. Some of you were in Washington on November 4th when we encircled the White House, 5 deep in people, demanding an end to this Keystone project. And that actually worked. 4 days later, the president said, okay, we're going to take another year to look at this carefully. That was a good thing to do. It did not sit well with the fossil fuel industry, and they went right back to work and got their bought and paid for, their harem in Congress. The senators and representatives who were basically on their payroll, they got them to try and revive this project, and they pushed through a bill to demand that it get speeded up. And then the president, to his great credit, said, no, we're going to deny this permit. He said it even though the American Petroleum Institute, aka Big Oil, had said, we will exact huge political consequences from you if you don't grant this permit. And they have the money to do it. So you can tell I'm not always, an inveterate fan of the president. I got arrested for sitting in outside his house. But in this case, he did the brave thing, he stood up, and that was good to see. And the reason he stood up is because we stood up, because you stood up, because we showed him that there was support and demand for real action on the things that he had campaigned on. This battle's far from over. Big Oil's back at work in Congress. It would be a big help if you could remind Senator Tester and Senator Baucus and any other senators out in that direction that you don't want this Keystone Pipeline. We tried to remind them actually pretty effectively 5 days ago when we got all the environmental groups in the country to come together for a day, and together managed to send in 24 hours 800,000 messages to the U.S. Senate. We did not, we said we were going to try for 500,000, and we thought that was an astonishing number, and we didn't know if we could do it, but we figured we better go for broke. We went by 500,000 in about 7 hours. In fact, I got the news that we'd gone past 500,000 just as I went on the set to tape the Colbert Show that night, and it made me in a good mood for that always very scary encounter going on Colbert, which went all right. I survived. It was great. I mean, one American in 400 on the same day sent a message to the Senate about this one pipeline. It's a sign that we've got this movement building. But of course, we're behind. We're losing. There are so many fronts, so many places we have to take on. This whole absurd world of extreme energy that we're now starting to delve into. It's not just tar sands. It's fracking for gas and oil across the country. That is exploding the subsurface geology to get more of it to flow. It's doing drilling, mile beneath the ocean in a place where we clearly have no way of dealing with problems when they erupt. It's doing the kind of wholesale coal mining in the mountaintop areas of the Appalachians or out there in the Montana and the Powder River Basin and all those places that are determined to become the coal mine for the entire planet. And we're trying to slow down the tar sands, we've got to slow down that. The good news is that we can, that these places are geographically isolated from the markets that they need to reach, and hence we have some chance of trying to slow them down. I was just out in Bellingham, Washington a few months ago, where they're trying to build one of the big ports to take the coal from Montana and ship it to China to get burned. We rallied 1,000 people on the village green. That's a huge percentage of their population. They want to stop that port. People up and down the Pacific coast. I'm headed to Vancouver in a few days for the same kind of thing. We need people there in the Rocky Mountains to try and slow down that coal at the source. And I know that people are beginning to talk about actions at the Montana Land Board and things as the summer goes on. August 20th, I think, was the last date I heard, where people will come together to do this kind of work. Look, all of it's important. All of it's connected. We need to think of it and talk about it and act on it, not just as a series of isolated things that we're working on, tar sands or coal mining or anything else. We need to understand that this is a movement, that we're all together in a big and hopefully bigger all the time movement, and that there are different fronts in that movement, just as the civil rights movement worked in lots of different states and lots of different cities. Some people were working on lunch counters and some on voting rights and some, but it was all the same movement. That's what we are. And we're in a, well, look, I'm not an organizer by training or background. I'm a writer, which means in some ways I'm terrible at this. I mean, I'm the kind of person that really left to his own devices would just sit in his room and type. I'm not good at speaking and organizing and all that kind of stuff, but I've tried to kind of learn, and we need you to try and kind of learn and do all that you can. And you've got to do it, and this is the hard part, you've got to do it with no guarantee that we're going to win. Now, there are scientists who think we may have waited too long to get started, and there are political scientists who think the odds are just too high, and maybe they're right. I mean, so far we've mostly lost. I suppose if you were a betting person, you'd bet that we were going to lose in the future, but you can't make that bet. The stakes are just too high, and so we need to go to work with everything we've got, even not knowing if we're going to win or not. When we did those arrest actions in Washington, one of the things we said was that when people came to get arrested, we wanted them to be wearing a necktie or a dress, okay? Not because, I mean, I live in Vermont. You see how I dress most of the time. I'm not a big fan of neckties, but we need a way to remind people all the time in everything we do the essential fact here, which is who the radicals are in this fight. And they are not us, okay? We are trying to keep the world in something like the state in which we found it. The radicals work at oil companies and coal companies and gas companies. They are willing, indeed they are hard at work, fighting to alter the chemical composition of the atmosphere. Nothing more radical has ever been done by human beings. I mean, if you were writing the next James Bond movie, the villain would be like, give me $1 trillion or I will alter the chemical composition of the atmosphere, okay? That's what Exxon sets out to do, and Arch Coal and everybody else every single day of the year, all right? They're the radicals, and we're the voice of common sense here, but we've got to be the voice of firm common sense. And we've got to be willing to lay it on the line. Don't think that you're alone. One of the other things we said when we did those arrests in Washington was that we didn't think college kids should be the ones who had to be the kind of cannon fodder for the whole thing. Because, you know, some of us have spent 50 years pouring carbon into the atmosphere, and also because at your age, you have to be a little careful about getting an arrest record in this economy. Past a certain age, you know, what are they going to do to you? You know, not much. So we didn't actually ask people how old they were, because that would be rude, but we asked them who was president when you were born, okay? And the two biggest groups of people who got arrested had been born in the Harry Truman and Franklin Delano Roosevelt administrations, okay? So that made me super happy. Young people have been in the lead of this fight all along and will be in the lead of this fight all along. And nobody's been more important than Energy Action and the kind of Power Shift movement. And I know that because it's now spread around the world. I've talked at Power Shift Australia and Power Shift Sweden and Power Shift UK and all kinds of places. So young people always in the lead. But it is good to know now that other people are starting to step up too. When we look at the pictures that flood in from around the world to 350.org, and we've now organized about 20,000 demonstrations in, as I said before, every country on earth except North Korea. When we look at those pictures, we realize that most of the people that we work with around the world are poor and black and brown and Asian and young, because that's what most of the world is made up of. And I want you to realize that you are a part of a big, broad movement. It's the most important movement there's ever been. It's a movement fighting not just for our own future, but for the future of every generation that comes after us, to try and keep the planet as intact as possible. And I don't know how it's going to come out. All I know is it's a great honor to get to fight shoulder to shoulder with you, and I will very much look forward to doing that in the years ahead. Thank you all very, very much. And now I hear you have a completely delicious local food dinner to go get to. So I will send you off to that and just say thank you so much. We'll see you down the road. Thank you all.
So we just had Bill McKibben Skype in from Vermont. That's pretty nuts. Yeah. And our last presenter tonight is Alec Lors, and his participation in PowerShift was made possible by a group here in Missoula, and donations from over 30 people. And first and foremost, we want to recognize a really awesome group called Melt. Is Melt in the house? Yeah, Melt. That's it stands for Montana Elders for a Livable Tomorrow. And these guys, yeah. These guys are fantastic. They're with us every step of the way, like student groups in college. And these guys, no offense, they all have gray hair. It's fantastic. The second group of individual donors consists of attorneys in Western Montana who've also been active in climate issues. Some have worked directly with Alec. Tom Beers, in fact. He introduced us to Alec. Where's Tom? There you are. Thank you, Tom. He is the lead attorney on the public trust lawsuit that we'll hear about from Alec today. This is Alec Lors. He's he's setting up his computer. Alec is the founder of Kids vs. Global Warming, and he's one of the leading young voices in the U.S. on climate change. And he's probably the most appropriate leader of the youth voice because he's the youth. We actually got to march in an I Matter march, which is something that Alec is a part of, and it was this summer. And the man who organized that is unfortunately not here, but we got to do that, and that was a big part of the campaign that we're going to hear about right now. Alec is now 17 years old and is in his senior year of high school in Ventura, California. He's been a climate change activist for 4 years, spoken to over 200,000 people on panels with experts, given presentations at schools, museums, conferences, and the United Nations. Kids vs. Global Warming is focused on empowering young leaders to influence the transition to a sustainable and just society through leadership programs such as the I Matter Council of Youth and a global campaign called the I Matter March. Lors' inspiring goal in life is to bring an end to climate change and is unwavering in his commitment to rallying others to join the fight. Our generation is the one who will be most affected if nothing is done about global warming, so we need to be the ones leading the movement to bring change. Our voices do matter. Please welcome to the stage, Alec Lors.
This can just sit up there, I'll be good.
That sounds good.
There's always the 20 seconds of awkwardness while I set up everything. But it's all good. So yeah, thank you so much. My name is Alec. I'm 17. I'm from Southern California. It's really so exciting to be here with this energy. There's just the movement that PowerShift has created and is fueling and is a part of is just so exciting. And I can just feel the energy here. Like something is about to something in a lot of ways things have already been pushing through, but it's just you can feel it. So just thank you so much for having me and for working so hard to have me here. It's just, yeah, thank you. So yeah, shortly after I got started when I was 13, I decided, I made that commitment to stop global warming within my lifetime. It was, when I made that commitment, I partly meant it, there's not supposed to be a slide, it's good. Yeah, that happens all the time. So when I made that commitment, I partly meant it as just kind of like a tongue-in-cheek way to show my dedication for this work and dedication for this movement or whatever. But on the other hand, I was dead serious, and I still am, I guess. Because as the great environmentalist David Brower once said, I'm always impressed with what young people can do before older people tell them it's impossible. Yeah. I think it's safe to say that all of us here are super passionate about putting an end to climate change. And I also think a lot of us struggle with the fact that if you think about it rationally, our goals are like practically impossible. It's like, I don't know, but honestly, if you really think about it, everything is impossible till it happens. So, yeah, and through my journey as an activist, I've begun to kind of look at what does that actually look like? Like, what does it mean to stop global warming in my lifetime or whatever? What does it mean to transition to a sustainable and just society and all that? And I've begun to notice all these little things that we all do just every day in our own lifestyles without even really questioning it. We live in a world where you can buy a $4 cup of coffee made with beans grown in Colombia and sprinkled with cinnamon from Sri Lanka. A world where we'd rather drive our cars 3 blocks to the grocery store than walk or ride our bikes. A world where, a world that views us only as consumers to be played, and the earth only as a resource to be conquered. A world where we turn on the lights and wash our clothes and use heaps of electronics without even questioning it. We live in a world where we believe that our government's acting with our well-being in mind, where we're told to believe that corporations are in it to make our lives better, I guess. and where we may not agree with the fact that putting gasoline into our car puts toxic chemicals into the air, but we still do it every single day, simply because that's just the way things are. Oh, that broke. That was supposed to be slowly moving while I was talking. Now I can't. It doesn't really matter. Simply because that's just the way things are. Yes. Brothers and sisters, we are the victims of a great sickness. A sickness felt by many but expressed by very few. A sickness slowly spreading, convulsing, flowing, reaching into the deepest corners of our minds, crawling underneath our skin, hovering over our heads, whispering constantly into our ears, lashing out when threatened, hiding, invisible, denying. It is a sickness programmed into our brains from birth, reinforced in schools, blasted through televisions, funded by corporations, providing funding for corporations, latching, scraping, feeding, holding, just keep shopping, The world is yours. Feel free to take what you want. Resent the people in classes above you. Pity the ones in classes below you. You are inadequate. You are inadequate. Buy this, eat this, apply this directly to your forehead. Don't breathe in, don't breathe out. Welcome to limbo. Safety, comfort. Ignore the words of the boy up on the stage. Nod your head in agreement, but ignore what he says. Denial. Look this way, look that way, look through these glasses. They're covered in dust because look through these glasses. They're covered in dust, but that's okay because the world out there is frightening. Run away from frightening. Run away from sadness. Never cry. Never cry. Fear death. Never, ever cry. Reproduce but feel ashamed about it. Keep your secrets to yourself. Love doesn't exist. Just keep shopping. Maybe one day you'll have as much money as those people on the screen. Maybe one day you can afford Photoshop to get rid of those blemishes on your face. Select the clone stamp tool and wipe those tools away. Tears away. Just keep shopping. Just keep shopping. Buy this hybrid car. It gets 60 miles per gallon. Now you can drive wherever you want to. Install this solar water heater. Spend 4 hours in the shower without feeling guilty. Guilty. You are guilty. You are filthy. You are broken, shattered. You have been torn into pieces. But hey, just go get drunk. It'll all become better. Just keep shopping. A new shirt will mend that shattered mind. Just keep playing that game. Just one more minute. I can stop whenever I want to. Those antidepressants aren't going to hold you for long. Quickly, hurry up. You're going to be late for that meeting. What the hell? Look at this traffic. My life is worthless. I'm only trying to provide for my family. How dare you threaten me? Boy, on the stage, you're saying that I'm worthless, but you don't even know my name. Shut up, get out of my head. Just keep shopping. Just keep shopping. We are the 99. But we wish we were the one. We resent the people in classes above you. We wish we could have it all for ourselves. If we were multi-billionaires, would we be marching in the streets down below? Step into this sickness. Feel it crawling. Feel feeding, notice how it feels threatened. Be with it, sit with it, watch it, listen to it, breathe. Pay attention to your breathing. Just be silent and feel, just embody that sickness. Don't shut anything out, let every thought in, every emotion in. Becoming aware of this parasite and listening to it is the first step in breaking free. Is there any way I could get some water? That would be awesome. That's kind of off subject, but like, oh yeah? You are my eternal savior. I am grateful to you forever. Yes. Thank you. So we have all fallen victim to this sickness. It was passed on to us by our parents and our grandparents and their parents and grandparents before them and their parents and grandparents before them. And the line of inheritance continues back for 10,000 years, through the Industrial Revolution, through the abolition of slavery, the American Revolution, all the world wars, the invention of the telescope, Hitler's genocide, Columbus's genocide, Beethoven's Fifth, the rule of Napoleon, the death of Blackbeard, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the outlawing of torture, the introduction of torture, the expedition of Lewis and Clark, the rise and fall of the Vikings, the murder of Julius Caesar, the birth of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the birth and death of Socrates, the birth and death of the Buddha. The Little Ice Age, the Big Ice Age, the construction of Stonehenge, the Great Pyramids of Giza, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, all the way back to just before the beginning of what we call modern civilization. That's where our sickness first began. Modern human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, have been on this planet for more than 250,000 years, just in this form, what we call modern humans. And for the vast majority of that time, we complied with the same natural laws as every other species on the planet. We lived in small communities, we hunted for our food, grew basic crops to sustain our families, we danced, we laughed, we played music, created things, made tools, drew pictures, and were happy with our situation. We lived like that for really a good 240,000 years. And then something happened. According to one theory, a period of intense aridification or desertification or whatever forced people to kind of move toward water, and that's where they ran into all these people from other tribes, and they started building these communities. According to another human, according to another theory, a certain human decided to eat from the tree of the knowledge and good and evil, and which transformed the species from a state of innocent obedience to God to guilty, broken disobedience. Historical evidence points towards something known as the Neolithic Revolution, when humans made the transition from hunter-gatherer cultures to totalitarian agriculture and complex societies. But really, no matter which theory you subscribe to, at some point human beings decided that we were somehow exempt from the laws of nature. Somehow somewhere around 10,000 years ago, our ancestors who had been living sustainably for a really long time decided that one group of people, that their way of living was the one and best way to live for everybody. And over the next few centuries, one by one, these small, healthy communities were replaced by large societies whose goal was to impose their way of living onto every other group of people on the planet. This is the birth of our sickness. This is when we decided that the earth was given to man as a present for him to do whatever he pleases with. We decided that human beings are the ultimate end product of all of evolution, and that we have every right to destroy all the natural landscapes we can get our hands on. Fast forward all the way to the present, and here we are. This sickness has been growing and growing and growing for 10,000 years, taking over our entire society, seeping deep into the souls of every last person fortunate enough to call Western civilization their home. We've conquered well over 90% of all the healthy hunter-gatherer cultures on the planet. We've used up almost all the oil stored in the ground. We've ripped out grotesquely large areas of forests, built 100-story skyscrapers, and we're still desperately trying to impose our way of living onto every last person of Earth, all in the name of growth and progress. And the sickness has been spreading for a long time, invisibly tearing at our souls without much notice, really. And in the past, even though in a lot of ways it's resulted in wars and genocides and all that, it's been kind of relatively harmless on a global level. That is until now. Really, for the first time in human history, our species is actually on the verge of extinction at the hand of every one of us and the decisions that we make every day. Beginning with the Industrial Revolution, our societies become hopelessly addicted to fossil fuels. And scientists and economists and activists and Bill McKibben have been warning us, desperately warning us, starting as early as the mid-1800s. Maybe not Bill McKibben, but other guys. But really, to very little avail. In a lot of ways, we're still continuing to move backwards in the fight against climate change. And now the consequences we've been warned about time and time again have begun to show themselves. As you're all very aware, just in the last couple of years, forests have been ravaged and homes destroyed by intense wildfires. Lives and livelihoods have been lost to unimaginably intense flooding. The world's most powerful and immensely vast ice sheets have begun to be reduced to shallow pools and floating icebergs, melting into the cold ocean faster than anyone could predict. Extreme drought has crippled entire nations, started wars, deprived millions of people of the most basic requirements for survival. Island nations such as the Maldives have begun to experience the practically irreversible effects of sea level rise. And here in the US, the people we've elected to take care of our country have decided to just slide all of these effects underneath the rug and hope that it'll all go away if the people can remain distracted for long enough. The sickness of our culture is making itself known in devastating ways. And I believe climate change is just simply a symptom of this deep-seated sickness. It's just a symptom of the disease. It is, however, the sickness that's going to kill us if nothing's done to stop it. And not only is the situation getting worse and worse every day, but as we're all well aware, there are so many people with so much money just determined to do whatever they possibly can to halt any progress that we're pushing for, any progress that's made, simply to protect profits and power, making sure that the money flows in just as fast as the oil flows out. It's actually pretty much illegal in our country for a corporation to make a decision for the sake of anything other than increased profits. The top 5 oil companies alone made $137 billion in profits just in the fourth quarter of 2011. That's, yeah. I'll end it. Climate change is always resisted the most by the people who profit from the way things are. And they're not going to give up easily. We pretty much are literally coming against the biggest opponents on earth, the people with the most money, the people with the most power, even consumerism itself. And the way that I see it, we've waited far too long to rely on solutions like riding bikes and buying solar panels. I believe if we actually want to solve climate change, we need to confront and heal this sickness of our culture at the very core. In so many ways, humanity is finally reaching the point where either the sickness has to die or we will. It seems impossible, but yes, everything is impossible until it happens. Imagine that we're all sitting on a boat going down a river. It all seems fine and carefree. Everyone is just kind of enjoying themselves, looking out at the scenery, just dense rainforest. We're in the middle of a rainforest. Getting another cup of Colombian coffee, pouring more and more gasoline into the engine to keep us pushing forward. It's a huge ship, like a cruise liner. But what a lot of people don't realize is that up ahead, just a few miles down the river, hidden behind a dense layer of fog, is a waterfall. A massive, powerful waterfall that'll surely be the demise of this fancy boat and everyone on it. we're already beginning to run into some rough water and maybe a few jagged rocks, but the captain is assuring us that it's okay. There's nothing to worry about. It's all fine. There are a few people who can see what's coming up ahead, who can hear the deafening roar that the rest have somehow drowned out with their shallow conversations, and are trying to warn us all about the impending disaster. You know, some are running around telling everyone to buy a reusable mug for their coffee or stop throwing their trash over the side of the boat and here, use this trash can instead. Some are arguing with the people who manage the fuel on the boat, trying to convince them to desperately to switch to biodiesel, even though we'll still keep moving forward. Some are pounding on the door of the captain with hopes of just convincing him to turn the boat around, even though the water's beginning to pick up speed. Some people are jabbing sticks and paddles into the water to try to turn the boat around all on their own. A few are even organizing marches to voice their concern, and some have just, thank you. Some have just given up entirely and decided to enjoy themselves while they still have the chance. All the while we still keep pushing forward. We still keep powering closer and closer and closer to that fog-drenched waterfall. And I think that I think we pretty much only have two options if we want to survive. Either we figure out a way to shift the course of this river entirely and begin to head in a new direction and continue on our merry way. Or if that doesn't work, we need to jump out and swim to shore and watch our beloved boat tumble off the edge of the cliff and into the abyss. This is the situation that we're in now. And yeah, I believe that the only way we'll be able to get out of this mess is to break free from our sickness entirely. Just jump out. And that basically means, we need to learn to value nature and the well-being of future generations more than we value money and convenience. We need to remember what it truly means to be human and alive, how it feels to be connected and part of the earth, how it feels to be connected to each other. We need to lift this veil of fog, hiding the reality that we're in the process of destroying ourselves. And we need to either change the course of this river and begin to head in a new direction, or jump ship and start anew. Because whether we like it or not, we're quickly reaching the end. The end of all that we've depended on for generations. We're about to enter into a period of death, and the metaphorical death as well as physical death. The death of oil, the death of reason, the death of convenience, and with all of these, the death of our sickness. And in all of nature, wherever there is death, wherever there is an end, there will always be rebirth. It's only a symptom of our sickness that we regard death with fear and avoidance. Death equals growth. Every end is also a beginning. It needs to be dark to see the light. Oops. And now comes the part where we get to envision what this new world looks like. What does it look like to break free from our sickness with our hands in the air, proclaiming to the world that we have overcome? Well, and this is the fun part. I believe that once we've had this deep emotional awakening, once we've broken out of the sickness within our own minds, then these changes in our lives and in our society will naturally follow. Just imagine what that would look like. Imagine a world where instead of running our lives off of fossil fuels, alternative energy will simply be referred to as energy. Instead of filling these wise old mountains with dynamite and hatred and blasting apart their souls in search of black rocks, we will simply understand that we are just one part of nature. We are just as much of a part of nature as the sun and the trees and every little last piece of fungus on the ground. Instead of being controlled by this black petroleum addiction and dodging gas stations on every corner, we will not only drive cars completely devoid of oil, but we will cease driving altogether, developing deeply connected, tightly knit communities where we'll be able to recount the dreams and life stories of every one of our neighbors as if they were the dreams and life stories of ourselves. And instead of being attacked by buildings twice as tall as the tallest redwood trees erected to hold thousands upon thousands of unhappy, cubicle-ridden human beings, buildings will at the very least be designed to function seamlessly and in harmony with nature, and every human being will be respected for their unique talents and passions. We will finally be at peace with ourselves, with each other, with all of nature. This future is possible. In fact, this kind of transition has even been done before. About 300 years ago, the people of Japan were feeling the sickness in an immediate way. They were facing food and water and energy shortages, massive deforestation, overpopulation, overdependence on the outside world to survive. And then, in a radical shift, they completely transformed everything they did. They broke free from their sickness, and they created a completely sustainable society. They were completely 100% self-sufficient, and their forests grew back, and population didn't rise at all for 100 years, and they were happier than they'd ever been. And during that time, a Zen saying came about or became popular that looks like this. It's translated as, "I know what just enough is." I know what just enough is. This was it. This simple saying defined with clarity and conviction their awakening. And this is exactly the kind of awakening we need now. We have to be done with this mindless mantra of more control, more power, more. We simply just have to step back and learn what just enough is. Once we realize this, once we begin to live in a way that understands that more is not always better, and that the actions we take really do affect future generations, only then will we be able to solve these huge problems that we're facing. And I believe that it's us, the youth, who can be the ones to bring this message about. I'm realizing that I'm running out of time. Am I correct in that? Okay, I'll be quick. You all pretty much agree that it's our generation who's going to solve this, right? Yeah? Okay, cool. so I can go quickly through that slide. Basically, we're affected most by climate change. I feel like we all have this kind of like inherent sense that we are called to change the world, even if some of us don't realize it. And I believe that we can be the ones to lead the way in creating something new. The time has come for the youth to stand up for what we know is right. Yes. Because it's really become clear that our government is not protecting the land and the water and the atmosphere that we as youth need to survive. And this is really an injustice. And something I didn't realize until a couple years ago, our government actually has legal responsibility to protect the planet for future generations. Isn't that like weird? And I feel like the time has now come to hold our government accountable for their lack of action, for failing to protect this planet. So I'm joining with youth around the world to take legal action and bring our case to the courts. We're basically suing the government for allowing money and power to be more valuable than our survival. And I'm the plaintiff for, I'm a plaintiff for the federal case against the U.S. government, and we're taking action in all 50 states. Where's John? He's here. There he is. John is the plaintiff here in Montana, and for the case here, and a few of the lawyers who are working with us are in the room too, and thank you guys just so much for that. This is really amazing. We're demanding that our government recognize the atmosphere as a public trust that needs to be protected for future generations. We're demanding that they commit to developing a plan to reduce carbon dioxide every year based on this plan that Dr. James Hansen and a group of scientists have developed that says, like, in order to get to 350 parts per million by the end of this century, we need to start reducing carbon 6% every year, and along with like 100 gigatons of sequestration, which is just like a lot of trees. But yeah, and it's actually, there's a lot of things happening with that now. There's a hearing next month, I think, and it's now not only the U.S. government that we're up against, but just in the past month, the National Association of Manufacturers has asked to be a co-defendant in the federal case. And this is a group cited with the honor of defeating every attempt the past few years of passing any kind of climate legislation. And now they're trying to join forces with the federal government to oppose me and a group of 12 youth from around the country. I think that's awesome. Yeah. See, they see us as a threat, man. Maybe even they can feel the power shifting. Yes. But we're not just standing up in the courts. We are standing up in the streets as well. I'm going to skip this part because throughout history, people organize marches. There's lots of marches happening now. And bam. We are really banding together as a generation to let the world know that climate change isn't about money. It's not about power. It's not about convenience. It's about our survival. It's about the future of this and every generation to come. And it's all, this movement has been happening for a while, and the work that all you guys are doing is fueling it amazingly. And I and my organization actually planned this event last year called the I Matter March. We the youth organized over 160 marches in 43 countries, which isn't 15,000 marches in 189 countries. I always just feel really humbled hearing Bill McKibben talk. But it's all part of the same movement, and it's been, it's just seeing these pictures coming from everywhere from San Francisco to Vermont to Nicaragua to Costa Rica to Bangladesh to Cancun, Mexico to Pakistan. We the youngest generation have stood up to make our voices heard. There was a march going up Mount Everest. I thought that was awesome. And there was one led by the 16-year-old son of an oil executive in Kuwait. He got in huge trouble with his dad. Yeah, which is great. Yeah. And there was also an awesome march here in Missoula, and I guess the person who organized that is not here, right? Was anyone here part of organizing that? Nobody? Well, thank you. I bet there are people here. You're just not taking credit for it. Thank you. It's amazing. So now is the time to continue this movement. And, we're going to be marching again this Earth Day this year to basically acknowledge and confront the denier in all of us. We're calling it the rally to celebrate global warming, or the I Don't Matter March. And we're basically just embodying our sickness with signs like these in order to acknowledge it and really take the first step in breaking free. Here's a list of all the other ideas for signs. It's like, clean air was so last year. I hate beautiful beaches. Oil companies care. Give generously to oil companies. Superstorms, super cool. Tropical islands aren't flooding, they're just taking a bath. Dust bowls are fun. Awesome. Up with sea levels. Yeah. Antarctica, too cold for too long. Yeah. So yeah, we're basically just embodying that mindset, basically just to kind of point out on one hand how ridiculous it is, and also just to be able to make the first step in breaking free from that. And yeah, I invite you all to organize a global warming support rally wherever you can, and just kind of connect the dots with the 350 action in May, and just continue to fuel this movement. It's really all connected. It's all the same energy. We must refuse to ever back down. Because we, the youth, have the moral authority to be able to call out these flaws. We have the power to embody this sickness and bring on the fire that'll allow for a new way. Because we are the voiceless, the dismissible, the overwhelmed minority. Okay. We are the voiceless, the dismissible, the overwhelmed minority. And we've decided now's the time to take our place in the world once and for all. No one expects us. No one sees us coming. No one has the words to describe what is happening to them. This is not your land, nor is it mine, nor is it anybody's. From the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, your time has run dry like the tears of indigenous mothers. The world is not yours. You belong to the land, so clap your hands. Clap your hands. And also clap the hands. And also clap the hands of your sisters and your brothers. The world is filled with wonder. You know you love one another. Raise your voice into the sky and bring down the thunder. Let the flames of the awakened turn the trees into burnt lumber. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are waiting no longer. We refuse to stop until the world is torn asunder. We sing subconscious songs, both joyful and somber. We will spread like a virus. We will tear apart like cancer. We will hold our fathers to their words. We will crush their mindless banter. We are the fire. We are alive. We will light every lantern. We will rise from the ashes of your burnt perfect future. We are lonely. We are scared. We are depressed. And we are waiting for the time of the fire, for the secretly awakened to come alive. We are artists, raised to think what we know not to be true. We are trained in the art of broken pyroclastic flows, rising from volcanoes, breaking through the windows of the damned, the godforsaken, the underwhelmed majority. The time of the fire is here, sisters and brothers. We are the awakened ones, the fearless, the indomitable minority. And we've decided now's the time to take our place in the world once and for all. Yeah. I believe with every fiber of my being that if anyone is able to break free from this sickness with their hands into the air, it is us. So let's make it so. Thank you very much.
Give it up. Give it up for Alec Lord. When I say power, you say shift. Power.
Shift.
Power.
Shift.
Power.
Shift.
When I say shift, you say power. Shift.
Power.
Shift.
Power.
Shift.
Power.
What up, Power Shift?